The observation deck of the Calanth research vessel Meridian's eye hummed with the soft bioluminescence that kept the Calanth comfortable during their extended voyages. Dr. Varixithel stood before the viewport, her 4 optical stalks focused on the human colony world below. New Carthage, they called it. 3 rotations of study, and the species still confounded her. Another structural failure in Sector 7, announced her research partner, Tom, his crystalline carapace clicking as he manipulated the sensor array. Human settlement patterns continue to defy safety protocols. They build upward when lateral expansion would be infinitely safer. Varixathel's mandibles chittered in what passed for Calanth amusement. Their apex evolution, Tom. No natural predators for 60,000 cycles. Their risk assessment is optimistic. Suicidal, Tom corrected. Did you review the metabolic data from yesterday's observation? She had. The human male designated subject 47 Delta had engaged in what humans called rock climbing, deliberately scaling a vertical surface with minimal safety equipment. His heart rate had elevated to 182 beats per standard minute. On any civilized species, the organic limiters would have triggered, flooding the system with suppressants, forcing rest. Evolution's safety mechanism. But humans? They just kept going. The biological data makes no sense, Varixathel said, pulling up holographic charts. Their cardiovascular systems should catastrophically fail at sustained rates above 160. Their muscle fibers should tear under loads exceeding 40% of skeletal tolerance. Yet they routinely violate both parameters. Without limiters, Tom said quietly. Varix, I've been running models. If we're correct about their physiology, humans are essentially walking around with all their safety protocols disabled. It's like piloting a ship with the structural integrity fields turned off. Before Varixathel could respond, alarms shrieked through the vessel. Not their alarms. The colony's emergency broadcast system, powerful enough to reach orbit. Structural collapse. Residential sector. Tom's manipulator appendages danced across controls. Catastrophic failure of a construction platform. Reading 37 human life signs in the immediate area, 12 trapped beneath debris. Varixathel's optical stalks swiveled to the magnification array. The screen resolved in a horrifying clarity. A massive assembly platform had torn free from its supports, crushing the corner of a residential complex. Humans were already swarming the site, but the scale of the debris was overwhelming. Support beams the size of transit pods had pancaked 3 levels of habitation. They're not waiting for heavy equipment, Tom observed, his voice carrying an edge of horror. They're trying to lift it manually. It was futile, of course. Varixathel's quick calculation showed that the primary beam pinning the structure weighed approximately 4,200 kilograms. Even with leverage, no biological entity without augmentation could. Varix. Tom's voice was sharp. Subject 23, Gamma. Focus on Subject 23, Gamma. The human female. Varixathel had cataloged her weeks ago. Sarah Chun, 34 standard years, mass 71 kilograms, height 1.7 meters. Occupation listed as educator. Mother of 1 offspring, male, age 6. Sarah Chun was running toward the collapse. Her child was in that structure, Tom said, his crystalline body refracting the emergency lights in a fractured rainbows. Life sign detected, pinned beneath the primary support beam. Through their sensors, they watched Sarah reach the debris field. Other humans tried to stop her, hands on her shoulders, voices raised. But she tore away from them, dropping to her knees beside a gap in the wreckage. Audio feed, Varixathel commanded. Get the crews here with the lifters. Sarah, you can't. Ethan. The human female's voice was raw, primal. Ethan, baby, mommy's here. A small voice, muffled and terrified. Mommy, I can't. It hurts. Mommy, I'm scared. Varixathel watched Sarah's hands move over the debris, finding purchase points, calculating angles with a rapid pattern recognition that evolution had granted persistence hunters. The beam was angled across the child, one end resting on collapsed flooring, the other pinned under a twisted support column. She's looking for leverage, Tom said. But the mass differential. The medical teams are 8 minutes out. Varix interrupted, reading the emergency channels. The child's biosigns are failing. Internal injuries. If pressure isn't relieved in the next 4 minutes. They didn't need to finish the thought. Sarah Chun positioned herself under the beam, hands gripping the metal, feet planted in the rubble. Her voice was steady now, carrying the artificial calm that humans use to soothe their young. Ethan, honey, I need you to be brave for me. When I lift this, I need you to pull yourself out, okay? Can you do that for Mommy? It hurts. I know, baby. I know. But you're so strong. You're my brave boy. On 3, okay? 1. This is insane, Tom whispered. She can't possibly. 2. Varixathel's sensors recorded everything. Sarah Chin's heart rate, 94 beats per minute. Respiration, elevated but controlled. Muscle tension, preparatory but within normal parameters. 3. What happened next would haunt Varixathel for the rest of her life. Sarah Chin's body changed. It wasn't transformation in the way of shapeshifters or the Vren metamorphs. It was as if every safety protocol in her biology simultaneously failed, or rather, was overridden by something far more ancient than civilization. Her heart rate spiked to 197 beats per minute in 2 seconds. Blood vessels dilated to maximum capacity, flooding muscles with oxygenated blood. Her adrenal glands dumped their entire reserves into her system. Varixathel watched in horror as the human's neural activity shifted. The prefrontal cortex, seat of rational thought, dimmed while the amygdala blazed like a star. The beam moved. Impossible, Tom breathed. The mass, the leverage ratio. Sarah Chun lifted 4,200 kilograms of steel. Not fully, not cleanly, but inch by agonizing inch, the beam rose. Her face contorted, blood vessels standing out against her skin like topographic maps. A sound emerged from her throat. Not a scream, not a cry, but something that predated language itself. Ethan, move, baby, move. The small human scrambled, dragging himself through the gap, even as blood streamed from his leg. Other humans rushed in, pulling the child clear, and only then did Sarah release the beam. It crashed down with a sound like thunder. She collapsed. Get medical down there, someone shouted. Sarah's down. She's. Varixathel was already scanning. Sarah Chin's vitals were catastrophic. Heart rate erratic. Core temperature 39.2 degrees. Muscle tissue showing massive microtears throughout her body. Stress fractures forming in her radius and ulna. She should be dead, Tom said flatly. Those readings, Varix, those readings would kill any civilized species. Her heart should have exploded. Her muscles should have torn themselves from the bone. This violates every principle of biological safety systems. But Sarah Chin wasn't dead. As medical personnel swarmed her, as they stabilized her child and loaded them both onto gurneys, she was conscious, crying, reaching for her son. Mommy's got you, she whispered as they lifted Ethan into the transport. Mommy's got you. Varixathel replayed the footage, running analysis after analysis. The numbers didn't lie, but they also didn't make sense. Sarah Chun had exceeded every known biological limitation. Her body had sustained damage that should have been lethal, yet she lived. Pull up the human medical database, she ordered. Search for any recorded phenomenon matching this event. Tom worked in silence for several minutes. Finally, multiple entries. Humans have a term for it, hysterical strength. Historical records show a female human lifting a ground transport vehicle off her trapped child. Another male human carried 17 other humans from a burning structure despite having 3 broken vertebrae. A mother who fought off a Terran apex predator. They call them bears, with her bare hands to protect her offspring. How is this possible? According to human medical research, it's a flaw, Tom said, his voice carrying disbelief. They call it a design flaw. Most species evolved organic limiters to prevent self-injury. Humans evolved past them, But the emergency override remained. In moments of extreme danger, especially involving offspring, the human brain can disable all safety protocols. Pain suppression, strength enhancement, metabolic overdrive, all at once. The cost? Potentially lethal. Muscle damage, cardiovascular failure, neurological trauma. But humans kept the trait because sometimes the cost is worth it. Varexathel's optical stalks fixed on the screen, where Sarah Chun was being loaded into a medical transport beside her son. The woman's hand clutched the boy's, and even through sensor feeds, the bond between them was palpable. It's not a flaw, Varexathel said softly. It's a choice. They build a biological system that lets them choose between their own safety and something they value more. That's insane. Is it? Varexathel pulled up files on human history. Look at their development. They're the only known species to have survived a global nuclear exchange. The only species to have voluntarily demilitarized 3 separate times and rebuilt afterward. They colonize death worlds not because they must, but because they choose to. Every safety we evolved, they bypassed. Every limitation we accepted, they refused. They'll destroy themselves. Perhaps, Varexathel said, or perhaps they'll force us to reconsider what it means to be alive. She magnified the feed, watching Sarah Chen's lips move as medical staff worked on her. The audio was garbled, but the lip-reading subroutine parsed it clearly. Is he okay? Tell me he's okay. 3 days later, Varexathel requested permission to visit the colony surface. The Callant were not a species prone to direct contact. Too many variables, too many risks, but this demanded more than sensor data. The hospital was a utilitarian structure, built with the practical aesthetics humans favored when resources were limited. Varexathel's environmental suit drew stares, but the medical staff directed her to Sarah Chen's room without question. The human female was awake, propped up in a bed designed for her species. Her arms were wrapped in regenerative bandaging. Monitoring equipment displayed vitals that were, Varexathel noted with relief, much improved. In a smaller bed beside her, the child, Ethan, slept peacefully, his leg immobilized but his breathing steady. Dr. Varexathel, Sarah said, her voice hoarse. They told me you've been studying us. I hope you don't mind the intrusion, Varexathel replied through a translator. I needed to see for myself. Sarah smiled, a uniquely human expression that conveyed warmth and sadness in equal measure. Needed to see the crazy woman who nearly killed herself lifting a beam. I've reviewed the medical reports, Varexathel said carefully. Multiple torn muscles, stress fractures in both forearms, severe cardiovascular strain. You will require months of physical therapy. There was a 43% probability of cardiac arrest during the incident. But Ethan's alive. Yes. Then it was worth it. Sarah's hand moved to stroke her son's hair. You don't have children, do you? The Callant reproduce through communal spawning, Varexathel explained. Our young are raised collectively. The concept of individual attachment to specific offspring is foreign to us. That sounds lonely. Varexathel's optical stalks tilted in surprise. She'd never considered it that way. It's efficient, safe. No individual bears the full burden of child rearing. No individual gets the full joy of it either, Sarah countered. Look, I know what I did was crazy by your standards. Hell, it was crazy by our standards. But when I heard Ethan screaming, when I saw that beam crushing him, there wasn't a choice to make. There was only action. You could have died. Yeah, I could have. Sarah's eyes met Varexathel's optical array. But he would have definitely died. So I made the math work. That's not mathematics. That's love, Sarah said simply. It's love. And yeah, maybe it's a design flaw that we can push our bodies past their breaking points. Maybe we should have evolved better safety systems. But you know what? I'm glad we didn't. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the person you love needs you to be impossible. Varexathel stood in silence for a long moment. Around them, the hospital hummed with activity. Humans caring for other humans, pushing back against entropy and chaos with nothing but determination and their fragile biology. We've been studying your species for 3 rotations, Varixathal said finally. We've cataloged your physiology, your psychology, your social structures. But I think we've been asking the wrong questions. What question should you be asking? Not what you are, Varixathal said, but what you choose to be. She paused, then added, for what it's worth, I'm glad you survived. Both of you. Sarah's smile widened. Me too, document me too. As Varixathal left the hospital, she composed her report in her mind. The Galactic Medical Association would need to revise its understanding of human biology. The Council would need to reconsider its assessment of human colony safety protocols. But more than that, the galaxy would need to understand what they'd failed to grasp about humanity. They weren't broken. They weren't flawed. They were something rarer, a species that had looked at the universe's limitations and decided those were merely suggestions. Back on the Meridian's eye, Tom waited with new data. The human medical teams have been cooperative, he reported. I've compiled a comprehensive database on human emergency physiology. It's disturbing. Show me. The holographic display filled with case studies. Humans fighting off predators with broken limbs. Humans dragging companions from burning vehicles despite their own critical injuries. Humans enduring blood loss that should have caused unconsciousness, staying alert through sheer determination until help arrived. They call it different things, Tom explained. Adrenaline rush, fight or flight response, second wind. But it's all the same phenomenon, the ability to voluntarily disable their own survival limiters. Voluntarily, Varixathal repeated. That's the key word. It's not a malfunction. It's a feature they chose to keep. Why would any species choose vulnerability? Varixathal thought of Sarah Chun, her broken body cradling her child. Because sometimes, Tom, vulnerability is strength. They accept the risks because the alternative, living in perfect safety but without the ability to protect what they love, is unacceptable to them. She pulled up the broader human history files. Wars fought not for resources, but for principles. Explorers venturing into the unknown with primitive technology and absurd optimism. Artists creating beauty in war zones. Parents sacrificing everything for children who might never remember them. They're not just surviving, Varixathal said. They're living. Fully. Without the limiters we consider essential. And yes, it costs them in injuries, in shortened lifespans, and tragedy. But they've decided the cost is worth it. That's irrational. Is it? Our species lives longer, suffers less, maintains perfect biological equilibrium. But what do we have worth dying for? Varixathal's optical stalks focused on the planet below. They have something we've optimized away. They have the capacity to value something more than their own survival. Tom was silent for a long moment. Finally, what will you tell the Council? The truth, Varixathal said. That we've encountered a species that terrifies me not because they're strong, but because they've weaponized their own fragility. They've turned their biological vulnerabilities into a kind of desperate transcendence. And if we're wise, we'll learn from them rather than dismissing them as reckless. And if we're not wise, Varixathal thought of Sarah Chun lifting the impossible weight, her body breaking as she saved her child. She thought of the human explorers pushing into radiation zones to rescue stranded crews. The human soldiers who threw themselves on explosive devices to save their companions. The human doctors who worked through pandemics until they collapsed. If we're not wise, she said quietly, we'll underestimate them. We'll see their lack of safety protocols as weakness. And we'll miss the most important fact about humanity. Which is, they don't just survive, Tom. They transcend. Every single day, in ways large and small, they choose to be more than their biology suggests they should be. They choose the people they love over their own safety. They choose hope over despair, action over paralysis, sacrifice over self-preservation. And that makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Dangerous. To assumptions, Varixathal said. To limitations. To anyone who thinks they know what's possible. She smiled, an expression she'd learned from studying humans. The universe gave them a choice between being safe and being human. They chose human. Every time. 6 months later, Sarah Chun stood at the grand reopening of the residential complex, her son's hand in hers. The structure had been rebuilt with additional safety features, but everyone knew it was symbolic. Humans would continue building upward, continue taking risks, continue pushing boundaries. That was simply what humans did. In orbit above, the Meridian Zyme maintained its watch, but now with a different purpose. Varix Athel had convinced the Galactic Research Council that humans deserved not just observation, but understanding. Other species needed to see what humanity had to teach. The lesson was simple, even if the implications were profound. Safety was important, but it wasn't everything. Sometimes, the ability to override your own preservation instinct, to become temporarily impossible, was the difference between survival and extinction. Not just for individuals, but for entire species. Humans had kept their emergency overrides, not because they were primitive, but because they understood something the galaxy had forgotten. In a universe of entropy and chaos, sometimes the only rational response was to be temporarily insane. To love so fiercely that your own survival became secondary. To hope so desperately that you'd break yourself trying. To be so impossibly human that you'd lift the weight of worlds for those you cherished. The galaxy called it the Crimson Threshold, the point where biology should fail, where hearts should burst, where rational beings should accept defeat. But humans didn't see it as a threshold. They saw it as a starting line. And every single day, in hospitals and homes, in disasters and in quiet moments of everyday heroism, humans stepped up to that line and crossed it, not because they were invincible, but because they decided that some things, love, duty, hope, compassion, were worth being vulnerable for. Varix Athel watched from orbit as Sarah lifted Ethan onto her shoulders, both of them laughing in the afternoon sun. The woman's arms had healed, though she'd always carried the scars. But she wore them without shame, badges of a choice she'd make again in a heartbeat. They're remarkable, Tom said beside her. They're human, Varix Athel replied, which is the same thing.